As you looked up the passage in preparation for today's Gospel reading, you might be forgiven for thinking someone had made an error in writing down the reference, for it's not very often that we get a Gospel reading of only 3 verses. These verses end the much longer chapter 10 in Matthew's Gospel, which has been set in the lectionary in previous Sundays. If you haven't had a chance to read it in full yet, I'd encourage you to do so. The 3 verses given to us today are, if you like, the cherry on top of the cake. Jesus, to use a modern analogy, giving a management summary of what has gone before. Matthew's account in chapter 10 shows Jesus at work instructing and commissioning the disciples who, let's remind ourselves, were pretty new and raw in their understanding of what he's taught them. Our 3 verses provide a conclusion and a reminder of the pros and cons of what they've been asked to do. So, to recap briefly, starting at the beginning of the chapter, Jesus gives the disciples the power to heal over unclean spirits, and then they are told what they must go and do. It won't be easy. They will face persecution. They will have to make choices between their faith and their family, even life and death, but they are not to fear. God will be there surrounding and upholding them in love, and Jesus, key to all of this, also promises to acknowledge before God those who acknowledged him and them. Their task won't be easy, but it will also be to encourage others in their faith and mission. Jesus is not quite finished though. There are some final thoughts and warnings for those who receive the messengers. Just getting to know them is not enough, but to receive the messenger means also to receive Jesus. Those who receive a prophet will be rewarded, as too will those who welcome the righteous, even offering these little ones, a term used to suggest perhaps the disciples, or someone very early in their understanding and faith. A cup of water will also be a reward, however large or tiny it might be. It is as if, in giving these early disciples a drink, you will be giving it to Jesus too. For you do for the disciples what you do for the disciples, you do for Jesus, and what you do for Jesus, you do for God. Let's not be under any illusions. This is a tough challenge. Whilst few of us will go the way of Jesus himself and his own disciples in being put to death for being a Christian, across the world people do die every day for refusing to deny their faith in Jesus. Being openly a Christian in our secular and at times hostile world is going to bring us anxiety at times, perhaps even fear, if we are confronted with the ugly situation, but we are not in this alone. We have, if you like, something of a circular dialogue and a relationship to draw on. God sent Jesus, Jesus sent his disciples out, they go, and those who support and welcome them complete the circle, which takes them back to God. This is a circle we're all called to inhabit too. Everything we do in the name of Christ will draw us even closer to God. Therefore, the good news is that this is as relevant today as it was when Jesus walked on the earth. Notwithstanding a very serious new virus, we are just as eligible to be blessed and receive as those first disciples were. Even if shielding in our homes, we can still do God's work. If we acknowledge the teaching of Jesus, it doesn't matter whether we're young or old, fit, elderly or disabled, black or white. God is steadfast and surrounds us with his care. COVID-19 has seen Christianity in the UK taking to the internet, and many have been drawn to watch and observe worship who would not normally come near our church buildings. Now, as these buildings are open again, Jesus stands in our midst and commissions us to continue our mission for him. We are called to go out to the places in which we live, where lives are broken and people are hurting and in great need. Not retreat back into our buildings and metaphorically shut the door, wonderful though it will be when that day comes to worship together again in church. We are to be God's representatives in our communities and beyond. And if you can't get out, be faithful in prayer and intercession, for that is no less a mission in God's name. God is at work in our land, just as Jesus was at work in the gospel. Now it's our turn to decide whether we're part of that or not. part of the sense of belonging to a greater community of witness that has withstood and will continue to withstand anything not of God that gets in the way. Amen.